Summer means mosquitoes, and mosquitoes mean crazy diseases. This year, however, horses are becoming their main target.
We're also covering new research related to the use of lime on soil, new signs of a U.S. recession, and exciting egg drama.
Let's get cracking on this week's episode of Magnetic Ag. I'm Braeden.
And I'm Savannah.
Welcome to Magnetic Ag Ears Edition.
Every week, we break down the top headlines and trends facing food and agriculture.
Fast, fun, and actually useful. Let's get it. You've probably heard of West Nile virus and maybe even Zika. But what about Eastern Equine Encephalitis virus, EEEV for short? A new JAMA Insights report said it's making a quiet comeback.
And it's not just for horses. While EEEV is rare, it's one of the deadliest mosquito-borne viruses in North America. It's putting both humans and horses at risk, especially in the Northeast.
So here's the buzz. From 2005 to 2024, there were only 193 reported human cases. Nearly all were neuroinvasive, and nearly half were fatal. In 2024 alone, 17 of the 19 cases came from Maine and Vermont.
The culprit. Mosquitoes like Culicita melanura, which carries the virus in birds, and bridge vectors like Aedes species that pass it to humans. Most infections are silent, but when they're not, it can get grim fast.
The symptoms really hit hard and fast. Think things like headaches, seizures, personality changes, and even severe cases, comas. Folks most at risk are those working outdoors in ag, forestry, gardening, or camping near swamps and marshes.
Unfortunately, there's no treatment and no vaccine yet. Diagnosing is tricky, but by the time symptoms show, your immune system has often already kicked the virus out of the bloodstream.
The most available thing we have is prevention. We're talking EPA approved bug spray, long sleeves, and swamp smart mosquito control. There's no cure, but there's a chance to stay one step ahead.
The bottom line, this is not a panic moment, but more of a wake up call. EEEV might be rare, but it's also deadly. With this changing climate and increased vector activity, ag communities need to stay alert.
So if you're working near wetlands, farming near wetlands, make sure to keep your sleeves long and your DEET stocked up. And you might want to keep an eye on some of those late summer bug bites.
From mosquito-borne risks to soil-borne surprises, let's shift gears from swampy threats in the sky to some unexpected climate science breakdown in the dirt.
You know lime, that chalky white powder your granddad spread to sweeten the soil? New research out of Yale is flipping the script. What if lime isn't causing carbon emissions from ag soils as we previously thought, but actually removing them?
Plot twist. According to Yale Center for Natural Carbon Capture, we've been pointing fingers in the wrong direction. It's not the lime itself that's the problem. It's the acid and fertilizer and pollution that's stirring up those CO2 emissions.
So here's a breakdown of how it works. Lime reacts with carbonic acid in the soil to form biocarbonate, a stable form that pulls carbon out of the atmosphere. But when strong acids like nitric or sulfuric show up, often from nitrogen fertilizer or pollution, they trigger the chemical chain reaction that releases CO2.
International emissions guides, like those from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, have assumed all lime ends up as an emission. But this research from Yale, using over 100 years of data from the Mississippi River Basin, suggests otherwise. In fact, in some regions, lime could be removing carbon at up to 75% of the theoretical maximum rate.
So for nearly a century, we've added more acid than alkalinity. And because we've penalized liming in emissions models, we may be overlooking a key climate solution that also boosts yield and reduces nitrous oxide.
Lead author Tim Jesper Scherhoff says we're targeting the wrong villains by quoting, "If we continue to add lime acidity to soil, we will react with remaining natural pools of alkalinity to create emissions, which penalizes lime rather than acid addition, which in cause replaces the blame."
Savannah, this is more than just an academic debate. It could change exactly how ag carbon credits are calculated and reshape climate policy for row crop regions. especially if future strategies combine silicate rock with lime to neutralize acidity and lock up more of that carbon.
Lime may not just grow your corn, it might also help cool the planet. Looks like the old school white powder might just have a green makeover.
We'll keep an eye out to see how the policy world catches up to this soil chemistry.
From farm fields to Wall Street, the economy is inching towards a recession, driven by labor weaknesses, policy uncertainty, and tensions in trade. Let's break it down.
Recent analysis from AgWeb's Pro Farmer warns that the U.S. economy is, quote, teetering on the edge of a recession, with labor weakness and policy uncertainty piling up. At the same time, an Associated Press economic briefing reveals that while headline unemployment remains steady at 4.1%, part time workers for economic reasons jumped significantly by some 460,000 more than usual. And policy unpredictability, the Economy Policy Uncertainty Index has surged over 40% since January, levels typically seen right before a recession.
But the alarms aren't limited to city centers. The Ag Web reports emphasizes that those macro trends are shaking rural America, where declining consumer demands, high interest rates, and shaky policy are squeezing farmers. Farm income projections for 2026 are sharply lower, especially as recent federal ad hoc supports fades, and sentiment among producers are sliding. Uncertainty over farm policy and trade are driven by key indexes lower, according to data from the Purdue CEM Barometer.
Savannah, let's look at the factors that are fueling this downturn. First is labor weakness. More workers are trapped in part time limbo, even as headline unemployment looks steady. The second is policy confusion when it comes to tariffs, shifting trade rules, uncertainty in farm subsidies, and even tax policy. For farmers, that makes planning nearly impossible. The third is trade turmoil. Agricultural economists estimating the row crop sector is already in recession, with tariff wars putting U.S. producers at a disadvantage. And the fourth is rising costs. Real expenses for inputs and interest rates have eaten into any remaining margins.
So, what lies ahead? Economists warn unless we see a policy softening, particularly on trade, and better labor dynamics, a broader economic shift could materialize within months. But the silver lining? Some experts believe targeted trade deals and moving exports beyond China and Brazil could rebalance markets, and that's a medium term fix.
In short, cracks are starting to appear, from labor trends to farm balance sheets, while policy fog complicates every decision. Recession isn't necessarily certain yet, but without a sharp pivot in labor and trade policy, the tipping point may come sooner than many expect.
We're heading straight from our recession rumblings to the latest federal food fight. And this one, it's exactly the kind of legal drama that could reshape ag policy from coast to coast.
Savannah, the fight over eggs just cracked wide open. The Trump administration is suing California, yes, again, and this time it's all about how hens are housed and how much your omelet costs.
Filed in a federal court in LA, the lawsuit claims California's strict animal welfare laws, including Proposition 12, violates federal authority and jacked up egg prices nationwide. The Department of Justice says that these regulations go beyond the Egg Products Inspection Act of 1970, which was meant to set a national standard for egg safety and labeling.
So here's the yolk of it all. California laws like Proposition 2 and Proposition 12 ban the sale of eggs from hens that can't fully extend their wings, stand, or turn around freely. California says it's about animal welfare. The Trump team says it's unnecessary red tape, driving up prices across all 50 states.
Attorney General Pam Bondi says Americans are paying more at the grocery store thanks to, quote, liberal policies and promises to, quote, use the full extent of federal law to knock down these rules.
Governor Gavin Newsom's office clapped back at the Trump administration's lawsuit on X by saying, quote, Trump's back to his favorite hobby, blaming California for literally everything.
Let's keep in mind this isn't Prop 12's first legal rodeo. In 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the law in a separate challenge from pork producers, so California is standing on precedents. But the Trump administration thinks eggs are a different beast.
The DOJ argues that Proposition 12 isn't even rooted in science. and that it criminalizes traditional egg farming practices with fines and potential jail time.
This lawsuit isn't just about hens in cages, it's about state versus federal power, food prices, and the politics of your protein.
Central Texas is reeling after catastrophic flash floods swept through the region, leaving families, farms, and entire communities underwater. The human toll has been staggering, and ag operations have not been spared.
Record flash flooding has devastated the area with at least 120 lives lost and over 160 still missing. In the wake of this tragedy, farms, ranches, and agritourism sites also bore disaster, facing drenched crops, damaged equipment, and stranded livestock.
Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller describes the scene as submerged tractors, irrigation systems twisted, quote, like a bowl of spaghetti, and cattle found lifeless atop fallen trees. Some farmers report total crop failures, equipment washed away, and fences destroyed for miles. Specialty producers, including ostrich farms and Christmas tree outlets, face steep losses and disrupted agritourism income.
But in true ag spirit, farmers and ranchers across the country have pulled together to support their community. Volunteers, FFA members, Fort Hood, and emergency crews are pitching together. This groundswell of grassroots support is a lifeline, especially for uninsured farmers. State and federal resources are now mobilizing the Texas Relief Fund. Hay and feed hotlines and 24/7 ag stress mental health support are all in place.
Savannah, it's great to see our ag community come together in times like this. And with that being said, I feel like we've covered a lot of egg stream stories today, and it's kind of making me feel a bit scrambled.
Well, Braeden, I think I've had enough egg puns for one day. Consider yourself extra informed after this week's episode of Magnetic Ag Years Edition.
Hungry for more?
Subscribe to our twice weekly newsletter for more industry news right in your inbox.
Or follow along on socials at magnetic.ag for more trends and headlines.
Thanks for listening to Magnetic Ag Years Edition.